Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, the lovely, the talented Miss Zoe Harrison. How you doing, Zoe?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I am fabulous. Thanks for coming on the show. We've been chatting, and this will come out in the new year, but it's the week before Christmas, so everyone's all excited. We're gathered around the tree. We've been having a fun chat. I actually don't even remember how I got connected with you. Calgary is such a great ecosystem for conspiring to connect us together, one of the things I think is our superpower. But we were having some fun with what you do. So I'm going to introduce you and I'm going to give you the floor. You're a strategy and innovation professional. That is just focused enough to be curious, but broad enough to be exciting. So let us into the tent, Zoe. What do you do? What keeps you enthused and blows your hair back, for lack of a better description?
Wow, what blows my hair back? Everything, and I think that's why I keep it quite broad, because it gives me a really wide playing field to get to dive down those rabbit holes and figure out what's interesting. And
be curious, which is one of my favorite.
Which is probably the underlying driving force of my career, and I guess my real life too.
The world you live in right now, where are you choosing to focus some of that curiosity and some of that innovation, and what field are you playing on right now? Let's put it that way.
So I guess taking a step back from that, I can talk a little bit about my background. I'm coming up on working in strategy and innovation for 20 years. I come from a business background, and throughout my career, unlocking the value of data in businesses has been a common thread through all of the roles that I've had. I currently have an independent consulting practice focused on applied AI strategy and developing innovation lab programs for organizations.
Very cool.
Over the years, I've mostly worked for large insurance and banking teams, but I've returned like the prodigal daughter that I am to support the innovation economy here in Western Canada.
We're happy to have you back. One of the many, is it called being repatriated? Is that the right
repatriated?
term? Is that the term for sure? Is that that's the official term?
I'll go with it.
Yeah. There's been I was talking to someone yesterday working in big tech, one of the senior people over at Longview. And he said, Tyler, like 5 years ago, we had trouble getting tech talent to come to Calgary. He goes, we hired 10 people a week ago, all from somewhere else that chose to move here because of what was going on here. Just talking about even where we were 5 years ago to where we are today, specifically in tech talent.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I was on a panel at the University of Calgary talking about applied AI, and the entire panel was people from the financial services industry. And I went to UC, I went to Haskayne, and that would never have happened. And I won't tell you how, well, I guess I've already said I've been in the industry for 20 years.
Nobody's got a calculator. We're not doing math here.
No one's calculating that, but that is just not something, like there wouldn't be that level or that field of tech talent, even, potentially across the board, let alone in a specific vertical of financial services. And it's so incredible to see. And, it was amazing even talking with the students. A lot of them are tech professionals themselves, and they're focused in a variety of different verticals. So it's amazing to see the breadth and the diversity in the way that it's growing in.
I love those stories. And what is, again, it's kind of slowly and then all of a sudden.
Yes.
I don't want to imply that, it happened overnight. It didn't happen overnight. A lot of people put a lot of effort to move this forward, especially in our city.
Yeah.
And so go ahead, please continue. That sets the stage for the who is you.
Yes, that is me. And alongside this, I've been building up my board portfolio. So I first applied to my first nonprofit role 12 years ago. So kind of early mid-career. I've worked with the government of Alberta in their board development program, and I'm currently sitting on 3 boards where I'm seeing a lot of alignment and success applying my innovation skill set in these roles. And that's kind of where I want to chat about today is thinking about innovation as a core competency for board governance.
I love it. And to be ignorant and also to ask the question, I'm sensing that there's a gap. That from your perception, there's a gap specifically around the concept of innovation, which we'll talk about even what that means in the context of boards. But you're bringing something that for you, that was table stakes in what you did, going, oh, hey, and was this a moment of like, I'm looking around, I see where these modalities or this way or this framework that I use could really benefit in this area specifically.
Yes, 100%. And I think, for me, I didn't even realize what I was doing, but I realized that through the different boards that I've been on and the way that I look at challenges, it's different than potentially what is traditionally sought out on boards. So
Okay.
board governance focuses on 3 areas. I like to think of it as a triangle. I'm a hand talker. You can't see this on the podcast, but I'm making the triangle side.
I love it. Thank you. I'm also a hand talker, so really appreciate props to you on that.
So on the base, there you have fiduciary duties. So this is the foundation, maybe some of what people might perceive as the drier part of board governance, making sure your financials are on point, compliance, accountability, oversight of risk. And then on top of that, you've got strategic work, which looks after the plan of helping you get to the vision. And then the part that I find the most interesting and the hardest part to get right is the generative thought. So this is creating the vision for the organization, refining the purpose and the mission, using foresight to see what's coming down the pipeline, and figuring out how you clear the path for the organization to be successful. This is the most important role that a board can play. I think of I always like to think of governance as a train, and and I'm going to get this wrong because I'm not a train person, and maybe you'll get comments about that's not the kind, but I see the board of directors as the cow catcher in the front of the train, right?
Okay.
So they're the ones that are clearing the path, setting the vision. There's a huge light at the front helping you go down the track. That is where the board of governance and the board directors sit in order to, clear the path and get you where you're going.
Because they're up above the day-to-day. They've got optimally experienced, sector-specific. They've got the time, the bandwidth, and that's their role, to look farther ahead. I love the headlight because your brain can only process so far. And if your headlight shows farther, you feel more safe, which means you can often go a little faster. If you want to bring in the whole car driving, and if our headlights are poor, we slow down because we're not getting enough information in to process what to do next.
Yeah. And the going faster piece, I think, is key there. Organizations are dealing with an aggressive rate of change.
Whether they like it or not.
Whether they like it or not, both externally, both internally. And I think as innovators, we have the frameworks to be able to deal with that impressive rate of change, potentially even go faster. And the other piece is that we have the ability to sit in uncertainty, to sit in ambiguity. And this is something that is partially our nature. If you're drawn to, in the innovation economy, I would suppose that, you're attracted to that kind of uncertainty. But also we have frameworks, we have experience working in the swirling chaos and finding a way out of there, and moving to be successful. And that's just not something that is common. It's something that feels potentially natural to people who are working in that space. But when you're working in the wider range, and there's more diversity with the people that you're working with, that is a really special skill set to have, and something that isn't necessarily recruited for on the boards of directors, because people are so focused on that fiduciary piece, maybe the strategy and the generative part. It's so nebulous that it's hard to kind of figure out, okay, who am I looking for to help with those kind of things?
That's interesting, because you've got your C-suite, you've got your CEO, you've got your leadership team that's day-to-day executing on the thing. Oftentimes, just playing my own biases around, the board's there to keep us in check and make sure we stay out of trouble, and we have all our diligence done because we're running 100 mile an hour. But I've never really heard a position that where's the board's role in helping with the vision or helping looking at the bigger picture, versus then just supporting the leadership team or the CEO or the visionary, whoever that might be, which kind of gets back to that mindset of there's one hero and they have the vision, which is also a very limiting way to think about that. Often doesn't work.
I think it's around, enablement of those, of the CEO, of the other professionals that are on the organization. Again, the board is clearing that path. The board is helping set that vision, and it's almost like a value amplification of helping your management team, and you're amplifying the deep expertise of the other board members. So I'm not saying kick out the lawyer, kick out the board,
we need all sides of the triangle.
Accountants.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely not kicking out people who have executive expertise.
Yep.
You need all of that, but you also need someone who is able to, deal with the rate of change that is coming, someone who's able to collaborate, someone who is able to open up the world of the board in order to be successful.
And in your world or your perspective, you're just not seeing even those roles being searched for.
They're not being searched for. And, you may see it, and I think it's, you can sometimes see it if you're looking for, executive presence, if you're looking for, there's different code words for there, but not always you're not seeing, I'm looking for someone who can help deal with the challenges of tomorrow. Traditionally, you see people who are like, well, we want someone who has dealt with, a finance change. We want this. So a lot of it is, the expertise is backwards looking, whereas the innovator skill set is solving the problems that we don't even know that we have yet. And that's where I think is a little bit of traditionally a blind spot in the way that board of directors are recruited, because you're looking for, a very, like, you want someone who has executive experience, you want the lawyer, you want the accountant,
which are requirements, to your point.
Which
you're
are
not saying in any way, right?
But again, I think that the concept of the innovative board member is to help amplify all those pieces too. So I'm not an expert in accounting, but I do have a background. I know enough to be dangerous, and I can ask those interesting questions. I can have a conversation with the experts that in that field, but also because I'm not an expert, I can ask the dumb questions that maybe take us on a different path, that maybe illuminate something that, we hadn't thought about. It really helps us think different. So again, part of the innovation skill set is being able to, dive down those rabbit holes and be able to be useful across a number of what's the word that I'm thinking of? Like across the number of areas of, I'm losing my
disciplines, different areas of discipline.
across an areas of disciplines.
So
I'm not an expert in it, but I'm able to ask questions, and I'm able to use my innovation.
How's the functional reality of that? So, I always joke, it's Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. You are that individual and you're on a board for whatever type of organization it is. How closely connected? It's not quarterly meetings. It feels more involved. That's what I'm hearing you say, that this is also much more, feels a little more in it together versus, well, we'll see you next quarter kind of mindset.
Well, I think, it's an interesting line to tread, because, you are not in management, right? It's, and the concept always, when we talk about boards of directors, it's noses in, fingers out. Like, you don't want to be messing around with what the plan is and where they're trying to go. But for me, being on the board, it's not about, forgetting about the organization that I'm working with until I have to show up and read the board book, give 3 points based on what's there. I'm using my innovation skill set where I'm scanning the environment. I'm understanding what's at play that's going to make an impact to the organizations that I'm working with. That makes me a better board member. So I can come in and actually add value to the management when we have those quarterly meetings, when we're doing that. And again, it's not necessarily being a good board member isn't necessarily, okay, I read the 200-page book, and yes, they are 200 to 300 pages, and I'm going to ask questions only on these 3 things, or I'm going to point out that there was a spelling mistake on page, 76.
That doesn't feel like a value add, but yeah.
To prove that I've read it.
Yeah.
I think
you found the Easter egg, you found the weird word that then you called out.
Yes, exactly. That it's important that you're aware of what's happening, and particularly as, someone who's trying to look forward and understand, where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. It's something that I'm always aware of and always looking into. And I'm always thinking about, okay, how does this external macro change impact the organizations that I'm working with? What is this change going to do? So it's never just I show up once a quarter, ask 2 boring questions and leave. It's, and I think that's definitely changing across the board for board of directors. Like that's just not good enough. You have to be adding value, and you have to have a relationship with the management to understand what they need from you. And sometimes some of that is a little bit of education around, how a board can help and what they can do. Because again, a lot of people don't have, formal training either on the board side, nor do you, when you're an executive, do you always have training around, okay, this is the role. How do you use your board, right? So it's an underutilized tool, I would say, or it can be an underutilized tool. So a lot of that is, again, creating a relationship and understanding your role, understanding how you can help without interfering in the day-to-day organization. So it's a really tricky line to tread. And particularly if management aren't sure how they can use it, they're a little bit nervous too, in terms of like, what information am I getting? Should I be listening to them if they start nitpicking around in my like plan and that kind of thing? So it's creating that relationship and creating that trust on both sides, that you're aligned and you're there to do a great job and make the organization successul.
What I'm really hearing is that, your pitch, or certainly your proposition, is that more individuals from the generative side. I'm just looking at my triangle. I drew out your and more people from that side is one of the biggest risks of that, getting too involved, back to the nose in, fingers out, versus meddling a little bit. Again, yes, I've been in lots of executive groups and heard, my board is this and it makes my life awesome. My board is terrible and it makes my life bad. I need to get rid of my board. I love my board. And I've just heard so many versions of that, never having worked directly myself, having lots of friends and other leaders, also board members, ranting about the things the company should be doing different. And it feels like it can often be a little dysfunctional.
Yes, it can be.
Okay, let's call a spade a spade, shall we?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's a dynamic relationship, and it's a very important relationship. And there's also sometimes, depending on your organization, financials in there. So sometimes, if there's people on the board that are also, investors, and like there's there's many. I can
see where that would get messy, and you see that more often than not, especially in the startup or the emerging ecosystem environment.
Yeah. And then so that's like an added layer of complexity, because it does impact the way that you present things, the way that you talk about things. And so it's just something that you have to be aware of. And I think, I would say the onus is on both management to kind of understand where they start and where they end, and also the board of directors to understand, where their role is, what they're doing. Having clarity on roles really, really helps with some of that ambiguity. And again, that's an innovation skill set of, it's an ambiguous piece. How are you going to deal with this? Always for us, role clarity is a key part, scope clarity, where you're trying to go. So again, it's almost second nature for people who work in innovation, where you're like, oh yes, well, let's define the roles. And it's not about like writing it down and creating a list. It's just knowing what your role is, where you are. And it's tricky, because a lot of us on boards, we either work on other boards or we've got other roles and other stuff. And sometimes we are management. So sometimes you want to jump in and think management-y. And so it's like, you have to definitely be conscious of kind of like, what hat am I wearing? And in the nonprofit sector, sometimes, you're also an operational volunteer. So like, you really have to be careful of like, okay, am I looking at the overall strategic nose in, and that I'm interested, but my fingers are out, versus, okay, now I'm going to have to actually like go and implement this plan and go and do that. So, I feel for people in the nonprofit sector, because it's like an added layer that you have to deal with when you're sitting on the board.
Thinking about individuals, you said you're on your first board. I think you said 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Is it about that formal training? Is it about getting out there? Lots of people start in the non-for-profit sector, which you used to just said is inherently challenging for other reasons.
Yes.
Just thinking about the journey, we'll talk about it from both sides, like setting up a board or finding yourself in a leadership team that has a board and maybe you weren't there before, or you've had a board for a long time and you want to get more out of it. But let's start from the side of like yourself. If I'm listening and I want to get into board work, and I've heard a lot of people, I really like to get on some boards. I really want to see myself doing that in the future. What are some of the key recommends? Like I appreciate the innovation and that value if you come from that space, but talk about the nuts and bolts of the role of being on a board.
Well, my first thing is, and I get this a lot because I'm passionate about boards. I'm passionate about getting people earlier in their careers on board. So I have this conversation on all the time.
So well-placed question. Okay, perfect. Then you are the right person to ask that question too.
and people are like, I really want to be on a board. And if you wanted to be on a board, go be on a board. Is my first question because you do have to treat it like a little bit like, a career application. Have you created a board resume? Have you, gone and talked to organizations that you would like to be on the board? Because on the flip side of that, when I was working for the board development program with the Alberta government, I was working with a lot of nonprofits, and they're like, I wish I could find board members. It's such a pain. I have to go and ask my sister's friend and try and drag them on. And it's and they don't care about it and they're not passionate. If you are interested in getting board experience, my first thing is, yes, look in the nonprofit sector and find an organization that you are excited and curious about and go and talk to them. That is how I got on my first board. It wasn't a meet and greet. It wasn't through a recruiter. I went and talked to the organization and talked to them about my background, my story, and how I thought I could help. And they were very, very excited to have me on this board, because you have to have boards. Most organizations have to have boards. Mm-hmm. So, that's a great way to start. The other piece that I think is really key is get a little bit of governance training, particularly on the fiduciary side. I do think you cannot get away with not being able to read a balance sheet. And I know that there's a lot of fear around there. And I wouldn't say I'm numbers isn't my number one thing, but over the years and, in my profession, you have to learn the numbers. You have to have that piece. And luckily there's tons of courses out there for low
non-financial managers, finances for non-financial managers. Yeah.
There's tons of those things for low and sometimes free. And particularly if you're looking to work in the nonprofit sector, there's a lot of stuff for free. So you don't have to go out and, take an expensive course. There are very expensive courses out there, and it's not that they're not valuable, but I think, in order to get
ICD,
started.
Is that one of the certifications?
Yeah.
ICD. And that's you're in the 20 grand plus range, aren't you?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And, very valuable learning. There's a lot of different reasons to join that. And it's also not for entry level directors. It's very easy to get started with a free or low cost introduction to board governance. You can look at the government of Alberta, but I think any province, has similar courses. There's lots of nonprofits, particularly if you're from a background that's maybe less represented on a board of directors. Typically, you can get scholarships. There's the Canadian Council of Innovators. They have an innovation governance program that I just finished, which was fantastic and focused. So
there's a pretty strong ecosystem out there if you want to go.
Very strong.
But what I heard, you got to put a little hustle into it.
You got to put a little bit of a hustle into it, right? So it is a little bit of I guess a side career. So I do have a separate resume. I do kind of have a pipeline of organizations that I would like to work for and talk to. So it is a little bit of extra work, but it is within your grasp if you put a little bit of
I appreciate
hustle into it. Long story short.
What would be, I want to join a board. okay, you shouldn't join a board for these reasons. Is there any reasons that come to mind? Because I just want to get on a board. I think it would be great. Okay, let me give you the reasons why maybe you're not considering with that statement. Not to be negative, but to really look at it. A lot of people that have said it to me, I'm like, I don't know how much thought you've put into this. You just think it's a cool thing to say.
Correct.
To be a little bit, I'm being a bit jaded.
No, it absolutely is. And I think, the number one thing that you have to consider is, whether or not a board opportunity is aligned with your values, and potentially less so your career goals. I think, sitting on a board can enhance those pieces, but particularly when you're on, a not-for-profit and it's very likely that they're unpaid. Yeah. You have to care about the vision, the mission that this organization is going to do. Because it's just far too much work for you not to give a heck about. I was going to say something different and you were going to have to beat that for me.
We don't have to edit that out later.
The second piece that I consider is, can I meaningfully contribute to this board? So for me, my background.
Can I add value? I think that's such a critical question.
Because again, if you're just sitting there doing nothing, it's too much work. It's not going to be engaging for you. And again, if you are looking to build out your board portfolio, you're going to need story points for, every board that you're on and what you want to do. So, to me, there's, it takes a little bit of work to kind of think about how you're going to contribute to this. And particularly if you have an innovation or a technology skill set, that is a very hot commodity at the moment. We're seeing such a rate of change. We're seeing, an incredible amount of opportunities in generative AI. We're seeing an incredible amount of risk in cyber. Those are really strong entry points to start that conversation around how you're going to
we need someone on the board that has this perspective, because once you identify the risk or the opportunity very quickly, I need to put somebody into that spot.
Yes, 100%. So again, it's thinking about,
so that's happening no matter what.
Yeah, it's thinking
just
about
who recognizes it at what pace at what time, right?
Yeah, and I think who recognizes that, like, part of that is getting your story going, right? So, and we all, again, an innovation skill set is being able to tell the right story with the data that we had to make it compelling. So again, you are your own product. You have to figure that out of how you're going to tell the story of your experience and how it can contribute to the board. I realize,
back to personal branding, we're all selling ourselves to one degree or another.
Yes, 100%.
I'm a marketer, so it is all about the story that you tell and how easy you make it for the other person to understand.
Yes, exactly. It's key, and it's something that you have to kind of hone and get better at. I think you were the original question was red flags. So
yes, please.
What I would look for is a lack of financial transparency. So if people are unwilling to discuss,
but why you would resist, why not to join a board?
How they're doing.
Yeah.
To me, that is a huge red flag. Like, you might have to sign an NDA. You might have to do all that kind of piece. Which is all
fair play.
Which is all fair, but an unwillingness or a lack of financial transparency is a big
red flag.
red flag for me. And particularly, and it's not that you have to be like a totally stable, like, companies are in different phases of their business journey, especially in the tech industry. There's a different lens that you sometimes look at startups for their financials and that kind of piece. And you're looking if they're net alive versus, if you're looking for a large established company, the financials will look different. But again, that's where you have to be able to trust the people that you're working with, that, like, even if an organization isn't doing, great, they have to be able to tell you that so you can help and you can figure out what's going on, where you're going there. A red flag that if someone's telling me that board members don't have to do very much, and they're just expecting you, like, I want you to be on the board because I legally have to have a board member, that is a big red flag, because you do have a lot of fiduciary responsibility at signing on as a board member. And if the management doesn't realize that, that's again another red flag on that.
What type of liability do you have as a board member?
So you can be responsible for payroll, pensions, basically.
Those are two very real categories.
Very, very real categories. And that's a lot of board members I run into, people who have just been kind of pulled on because, you know, they're a friend of a friend, or those people aren't aware of that. So, you know,
that's no joke for sure. Yeah.
That's no joke. That's no joke. You are responsible for people's livelihoods, personally responsible for that.
And is that where you would want to look at, like, I need insurance, I need coverage, like there's more to it than just signing up to the board? That's where you need to go a little bit later.
It's ensuring that your board, that the organization has purchased directors and officers insurance. And that would be my next red flag. If that doesn't exist, I think even in very small organizations, that would, for me personally, would make me pause very hard.
Okay.
But particularly if there's paid employees, absolutely not. You know, and I think that changes. There's complexity in there. You know, if you have operations in the States, for example, or employees in the States, that's an even bigger liability and exposure to that. So again, understanding what you're getting into. So that's kind of where there people are saying, yeah, don't worry, just like come on the board, sign on the dotted line. 100% no. And then the last piece, and we've already talked about this, is, you know, if there's a lack of role clarity, if management don't know why you're on there, if you don't know why you're on there, that's a huge.
It sounds like a recipe for trouble. Yeah,
it's a recipe for trouble. It's a recipe for trouble for that. And you can
amazing how many organizations have teams that don't know why they're on there either.
Well,
I was like, that's a bigger systemic problem I run into, and especially in the small run fast startup, we don't have time to do it right, so we'll do it twice kind of mindset.
yes, 100%. But I think, you know,
we've all been there from time to time.
we've all been there. We've all been there, and particularly, I think, you know, I'm a curious person, so I'm definitely the one who's like, well, I don't know anything about this, so I better like jump in and join and figure out what the heck is going on. Maybe take a beat if you're joining on the board. Just for that liability piece and the amount of work that it takes and energy that it takes.
Now let's flip it. Let's give the organizations a chance to also have their red flags. If someone wants to get on your board, I think you've touched on some of them, of like they're not passionate or not engaged, or maybe they don't have a skill set. Again, any really clear, if you were consulting with a leadership team that's like, oh, we're either setting up a board, or you know what, we need to throw our board out, we need to get a whole new thing, we're pushing the reset button. I hear that a lot too. What are some of the things, like obviously the key roles, is anything there that we haven't kind of touched on? Because we've kind of loosely talked about most of it, I think, or a lot of it.
I think from a management perspective, you have to be looking at the diversity of your board. So, and I'm not talking just, you know, gender, because that's always, I think, a conversation that comes up.
That's the easy one. Let's be honest. That's the one you can just point at. But the truth, the word diversity means a lot. It's a complex word.
You know, and so, you know, it's worth taking a little bit of work to understand what a diverse board means to you in terms of skill set, in terms of, you know, absolutely demographics, in terms of, you know, being able to avoid groupthink and being able to bring in different perspectives. But to me, that's where I start, because I think, you know, sometimes you'll see, like, you'll inherit board members, either if they're investors or, you know, maybe you're new to the organization and you've got people that have been there since the dawn of time. I'm not necessarily saying if you've been there since the dawn of time, you're not adding value, but you need to be able to look at the board holistically to see where you need support in amplifying the value that they're bringing, and also support that you need. So, you know, for some tech companies, for people, you know, you might want people that have taken an organization from 0 to 1, or have scaled, or have gotten, you know, have gotten lots of investment.
Have hiked the path you're about to hike.
Have hiked the path that you're going to.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't need all people that have hiked the path that you've done,
Well,
but you need
back
at
to the
least
triangle, right? There's
one
different
person.
sets of rules for the roles in the
So
triangle.
it's always coming back to that triangle and looking to see, do I have the right people here? Do I have the right mix? And that's very similar to what you do with your management team, which you do with your workers. So it's applying the same thing, but it's a different lens, because you're looking for more holistically, you're looking more high level in order to help you help guide you down that path.
Really what I'm hearing is taking the time, be very deliberate about it, because if you're going to do it and get value out of it, you'd need to put some effort and energy into being and knowing that might change and re-looking at it on a regular basis is what I'm also hearing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And board members
sounds obvious, but I know it slips through the cracks when you're busy, right?
It's not. And I think, and board members have to be ready for when their time is done too, I think, depending on the stage and the journey of the organization, you might be incredibly valuable at one stage. And then, as the organization matures and things change or external factors change, you always need to be looking at that. And we're seeing people bringing in term limits now. And that's becoming like a board governance best practice. It's still 9 years. We can avoid
the awkward conversation in 2 years because it's just built into our governance.
100%.
Yeah, it's just
100%. But I think, it's a natural attrition that should be happening. And if it's not happening and people are staying on too long, you have to think about kind of why those reasons are. And some of it is
it's strategic churn.
Strategic churn. I like that.
Because churn sounds negative. Like, oh, it's churn. I'm like, well, no, we're doing that on purpose because we're looking for a fresh perspective.
Refreshment. Yes.
Strategic board refreshment. Would you like to refresh our board? Yes. But thinking about what you said, even if you've been there for a long time, that's not a negative. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to say, if you're not someone who's staying up and current and has that fire, that energy to push and to learn and to see what's going on, no matter where you are on the triangle, the world, every element of that triangle is still getting disrupted, right?
Yes.
Because what was fiduciary is now being impacted by the speed of change that's driven by technology. And then we got AI and cyber, two things you touched on, that are coming in so quick that are literally changing all of. Oh, but that's not in my department. Yeah, but it's going to be impacted. It's going to have a trickle down, right?
Yeah, I would say, from the board perspective, there's no such thing as that's not my department. That is why you are there for oversight.
That's not my job. Oh, yes, it is. Yeah,
oh, it is. And that's what makes a really great board member is being able to be curious about stuff that's not in your wheelhouse. And you touched on something interesting in terms of the rate of change and technology. I think this is where there's a huge opportunity, at this particular time for people working in technology and innovation at this current time, because the landscape has changed so significantly with generative AI. And so not even if you're like, I'm a Gen AI expert, the fact that you're existing and working in using current technology, that is a skill set that doesn't necessarily exist on people's boards if they have not been working in the industry, even 3 or 4 years ago, so
which is crazy when you think about the rate of change.
It's mind blowing, but I think, that is where the opportunity here is, I think, particularly at this time, is because we have this nugget of, yes, we're working in a Gen AI environment. We're thinking about how this impacts all different types of organizations. We're having those conversations every single day. And it's a conversation that's happening at the board where they're like, dang, we need to figure out what we're going to do about AI. And it's like, and the conversation, if you don't have someone that's at least working and understanding and seeing how it can work in a business context, you're starting out having these weird conversations around are robots going to take over our lives? And then you get into this existential.
You fall victim to headline speak, right? Versus
you fall victim to headline speak, and that is not valuable. So you need,
it's incredibly distracting. It's almost designed to be that way.
Well, exactly. And you need more people to be able to bring it down into okay, what does this mean for me in the next 2 years? What does that mean for me in the next 5 years? And you can start going out, but to me, it's save the existential conversations for the chat afterwards, after the meeting is done. But, we need to be able to have nuanced conversations about the changes that are happening. And that's where I think the particular opportunity at this time is that if you are mid-career or not, and you're actually working day to day, thinking about these things and thinking how it applies to your business, there's a lot of value on figuring out how to create a more nuanced conversation rather than having that headline speak, as you say.
And is that, and you haven't said this, so I'm going to say it, but from an age perspective, that kind of tends to start to index a little bit younger because, like you said, these are people in these roles that didn't exist a few years ago. So by inherent nature, it's like, hey, we need to shift our boards, which are going to index a little bit younger to get access to some of this thinking. It's kind of what I'm hearing, or that's my interpretation from the outside.
Yes, 100%. And it's additive because you do need someone that's, being an executive for years and years and years, because that's a different lens.
Well, we've never had more cohorts in the workforce. We need to have that much diversity of cohorts on the boards too. Is what I'm really hearing.
100%.
Right? It needs to reflect itself all the way out. But it's always traditionally been an older, you're on a board because you're on that phase of your career. What I'm hearing you say is the world we live in now, that it demands a different level of diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs a different level of diversity to amplify.
It's really hard to argue that point, I would say. Because you're not saying is, I love it. I love your word additive, because we tend to live in this something. Well, if I take this, I have to give up that. It's like, no. We need to add it together and then find a way to make it function really cohesively, which that's probably the bigger trick right there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you've got different perspectives and that's not the way you've done it before. I'm like, well, that's the only way I've ever done it because I've been doing it for this many years in a new space.
Yeah.
And companies that are just being like throttled with competition and funding and like the rate of change, to your point, like the bullets are coming in from every direction.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the nice thing from the innovative perspective is that, we also, our soft skill is being able to sit in that madness and be
in
able
the chaos
to hang,
of the bullets or whatever.
This
is maybe a bad metaphor.
And be able to help move people through that.
That's exciting. The stewardship, the guide, I'm okay with this. Yeah, I'm okay being uncomfortable. I'm so okay with it. It doesn't make me uncomfortable anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Just because I want to geek out a little bit, obviously your role and your time you spend with generative AI, what's kind of getting you excited just from that space? Like you're on a board and we're in a board meeting today. What cool or wow heads up, or what are you bringing to the table based on some of your views in that world?
Well, I think it's from a board perspective, it's getting less excited about the possibilities now and getting down to brass tacks and thinking about how we can
hype cycles over here. Let's get down to reality over here.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think, we're in the cycle and people are getting super excited and then, not excited because
the trough of disillusionment.
They're typing things in and they got the wrong recipe for their
the whole thing's bullshit now, and I flip my desk over. Yeah.
So I think it's bringing a grounding presence to what it can do, where it can go, and how we're actually going to tackle this mammoth fundamental cultural change, and really bring it down to reality of like, how are we going to use this year? How are we going to use this going forward? And, where do we see it going? So, as much as I like to be wild and crazy and think about, be a possible. So I read it somewhere on LinkedIn, like a possibilitarian. Super fun.
Oh, I love a good made up word too. That's great. A possibilitarian.
It was on LinkedIn. I'm sure it exists. But
obviously, if someone wrote it, it must be true.
I think at this point in time, I'm really trying to ground people and figure out, it's like, no, it's an actual usable tool. How are we going to use this to solve our business problems, to, increase personalization, to create a better experience? I no longer want to be up talking about the possibilities. I think, that's been done to death. You can look
I like that. Okay.
everywhere to figure out, how we could use it. I want to start focusing on how we're actually going to use it, how we're going to
positively impact our business and ultimately our customers.
Yeah. How we're going to, look at our data and get it set up. Because I think like a lot of times, like we're talking about incredible opportunities, and our data is just not our data isn't ready. It's not in a state that we can actually use it. And particularly and that might be from my perspective, because I, work a lot with legacy companies, and just the massive transformation that it's going to take to get the data all together in the right spot to be able to do something
kind of like getting the oil out of the ground a little bit.
Yeah,
the joke, right?
Exactly.
I know it's there, but and then technology comes along to help you do that, but that doesn't happen overnight.
It's all about unlocking the value, right? Like it's no good to us if it's in the ground. It's no good to us if the data is everywhere. In the corner of the
room. If you really want to get.
Yeah.
Anyone I've met or anyone I interviewed that's worked in data for a long time, they're like, my first job was like, here's a box of data, figure out how to do something with it. We're just doing a more digital version of kind of that same problem, right?
100%. And that's what I've been doing for literally the last 20 years. And now like there's more tools, it's more exciting. People are paying attention to it. But it's the same.
You're still kind of solving for the same problem.
You're solving for the same problem with an incredibly cool and possibly, riskier and more expensive tool.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong? But that is where possibility, and it's not about avoiding risk. It's about managing it. It's about understanding it, which really comes back to having a board members with experience that can help you go, maybe don't step there. There might be a landmine over there because I've stepped on it before. Right?
100%. And I think, like I started out in risk management for an insurance company. So like, I think it
so you're very familiar with the formulas that go with that world.
But it trained me to be a great innovator because it's the same. It's not about, risk management. It's not about not doing something. It's about managing the risk and capturing the upside and protecting from the downside. So it's, that's another conversation too.
It is. I will resist jumping down another rabbit hole.
Why I troll the risk management departments for my secret innovators.
That was a little bit of your secret sauce. If anyone's still listening, nice. So what I'm really hearing though is a call from you for people that maybe didn't necessarily before this podcast see themselves as potential getting involved in boards or being able to add value. And I'm hearing you say, no, that's exactly what we need.
100%. And I think, I have these conversations and it's about thinking about how your story changes on how you present yourself to the board and also actually going out and doing it, trying to join a board. I think like that is
sooner or later you have to do the thing, right? You can't talk about skiing. You have to go skiing.
100%.
or whatever you want to use for that.
Get on that chairlift. Maybe start with the bunny hill. I don't know. I struggle.
And we've all picked the black run too soon and went, oh my goodness. Okay. Lesson learned. Let me go back and revamp my skills.
Yes, exactly. And that's fine too, right? Yeah. That's another data point you've learned. Don't go on the black runs. So, it's similar. It's a similar approach for your life, your career, your board career. It's applying the same things and moving in that direction. I
start even understanding, I didn't even think of that for me, or I didn't, just the power of like, yes. Well, that's a new way of looking at something and thinking of individuals that have been in these careers for a short period of time, but how in demand they are and where they can take it. I think that always gets me. I love possibility and potential. Yes. It gets me so excited. And I'm hearing a lot of potential, but I'm also hearing this as a bit of a make or break from you. Like we need to do this because it's happening to us. If we don't,
right? And we need to be having the right kind of conversations. And I do think that people who are working currently in these kind of technology spaces, you're able to have those conversations. You just have to figure out how you're communicating it. And we can really take a leadership role on driving it instead of having to wait until we're, 70 and
totally. Yeah.
And
I love busting up old paradigms as well too. So I'm all about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the way we thought of it before, but the world has changed.
Exactly.
That worked when it worked, but things, and also hearing that there's probably boards out there or leadership teams, maybe not even knowing how to articulate that they need something different, like to reflect in what you just said.
100%. And we can help frame that and shape that and have a nuanced conversation.
Oh, I love it. So it's so fun. I love your energy and your clear passion for this topic, which anyone who loves what they do, I'll talk to them about just about anything if they're passionate about it. And that shows up in spades for you and you're living it and you're doing it. If someone wants to reach out to you, are you LinkedIn? Are you smoke signals, carrier pigeons? What's your preferred? There's so many ways to communicate, but what do you like?
LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. And if you are a management team looking for diverse board skill sets and you're looking for a role, reach out to me because, I have lots of conversations in the community about people who are interested. And, I'd love to connect some people from this conversation. What I also heard is
there's people looking to get on boards and there's people saying they can't find anybody. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, okay, there's a connection problem here. There's an opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. And some of it is actually, reaching on, I think on both sides, reaching out a hand to do that and make that connection.
I love it. So thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for your passion and your clear and unbridled enthusiasm for this topic.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.